Imagine being born into a faith where one man was believed to speak for God, where his words carry the same weight as God's words, where questioning him could also cost you your family, your community, maybe even your salvation. For thousands of people, that wasn't imagination, it was our childhood. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I want to persuade you that while freedom of religion is one of our country's most fundamental rights, it should never be used to protect cults or other organizations that rely on coercion, manipulation, and abuse. Whether if you're religious or not, somewhere in between, this topic affects all of us. If you value your religious freedom, this conversation is about protecting that freedom while making sure it isn't used as a shield for abuse. This topic is deeply personal to me. I grew up in what I now recognize as a cult. So I'm not speaking as someone looking in from the outside, I'm speaking as someone who lived it. I experienced firsthand how manipulation can become normalized when people are taught not to question authority. Today, I'll explain how religious freedom protects our rights and how those protections can sometimes be exploited by cults, and why accountability is also necessary to protect both faith and people. First, we'll talk about the purpose of religious freedom. Then we'll examine how some cults use that freedom to hide harmful practices, while finally we'll discuss why accountability is necessary to protect both religious liberty and the people it was meant to serve. Before we can talk about cults or accountability, we first have to understand what religious freedom was actually created to protect. The First Amendment guarantees every American the freedom to practice their religion or to choose not to practice one at all. It protects our right to worship according to our own beliefs without any government interference. So as you can see here in this image, one of the greatest strengths of our country is that people from different faiths and backgrounds are free to live according to their beliefs. Religious freedom allows diversity to exist, protects minority religions, and even prevents the government from deciding which beliefs are right or wrong. As I was reading the Harvard Law Review article, The Structure of Religious Preference, the court has relied on principles of neutrality and non-discrimination in revolutionizing its religious freedom jurisprudence. In other words, the law exists to protect everyone's rights to believe differently. It doesn't give any organization the right to manipulate people, commit crimes, or avoid accountability simply because it calls itself a religion. Religious freedom is one of the foundations of our democracy. But like every constitutional right, it has its limits whenever another person's rights are safe, when it's about another person's rights or safety, or when they're being violated. Now that we've looked at what religious freedom was designed to protect, let's examine what happens when that freedom is used to hide harmful practices. Now that we've looked at the purpose of religious freedom, let's look at what happens when that freedom is misused. Not every religion is a cult, but many cults use their protection of religion to hide coercion, manipulation, and abuse. Instead of encouraging people to think for themselves, they often demand complete obedience to a single leader, discourage questioning, or create fear around leaving the organization. One of the most common forms of control is isolation. Members are often taught to distance themselves from anyone who questions that group's beliefs, even close friends and family. Fear and guilt become powerful tools to keep people from leading. As you can see here, unfortunately, manipulation isn't always the only harm. Many cults have also been linked to emotional, physical, and financial abuse, and even at times sexual abuse. In many cases, leaders spend years protecting their reputation instead of protecting the victims. As I was reading the 2024 Journal of Forgotten Milestone, Denialism and Child Abuse in the Christian Church, the authors write, more churches have begun addressing this crisis, but many resist accountability and prevention efforts. They minimize, deny, and oppose survivors, causing deep wounds. As I was reading that, I couldn't help but think about my own childhood. I was born in La Luz del Mundo, or the light of the world, as some people may know it, a church that shaped every part of my life. It wasn't just my religion, it was my culture, my identity, and even my family history. I was taught that the apostle Nason Joaquin Garcia was chosen by God, and that loyalty to him was loyalty to God himself. That all changed the day he was arrested. Child sexual abuse and multiple victims. My husband and I were faced with a decision we never really imagined having to make. We chose to leave the church, knowing it would cost us our relationship with family and friends. Some people even told us that we were turning our backs on God, and others cut ties with us completely. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it also taught me something I'll never forget. Real faith should never require people to ignore abuse or turn their backs on victims. Once manipulation and abuse enter the picture, this is no longer just an issue of religious freedom. It's an issue of protecting people. That brings us to my final point: why accountability is necessary to protect both religious liberty and the people it was created to serve. We've seen how religious freedom protects our right to believe, and we've also seen how that can happen when the freedom is used to hide abuse. So, how do we protect both religious liberty and the people who practice it? The answer isn't taking away religious freedom. The answer is making sure no one is above the law. Religious organizations should absolutely have the freedom to practice their beliefs, but when crimes are committed, they should be investigated and prosecuted, just like anyone else would, as you can see in this image. Accountability protects everyone. It protects victims by encouraging them to come forward. It also protects religious communities by holding abusive leaders responsible instead of allowing them to continue harming others. And it protects religious freedom by making sure it isn't used as a shield for criminal behavior. According to the article, Religious Freedom and Harmful Religious Practices, Olga Kudryashova explains that religious freedom is a fundamental right, but governments have also a responsibility to intervene when religious practices cause serious harm to others. Religious freedom should always protect someone's rights to believe, worship, and practice their faith, but it should never protect abuse, exploitation, or criminal acts simply because they happen inside a religious organization. When we protect victims and hold leaders accountable, we aren't weakening religious freedom, we're strengthening it. Which brings me now to my conclusion today, that we've looked at why religious freedom is one of our most important constitutional rights, and how that freedom can sometimes be misused to hide coercion, manipulation, and abuse, and why accountability is necessary to protect both faith and the people who practice it. My story began with my childhood, church, and family, and it led me through painful truths, but it also gave me the courage to choose freedom. I know this because I lived it. I've learned that protecting people and protecting religious freedom are not opposing ideas. In fact, they go hand in hand as you see it. As you leave today, I encourage you to learn the warning signs of coercive groups, support victims when they come forward, and protect faith, not abuse. As I close today, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I believe it reminds us why accountability matters and why protecting people should never come at the expense of justice. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you.